People who have had to kill in self-defense. Did you ever recover psychologically? Story 1. I work graveyards at a gas station in that gray area part of my town where a good neighborhood is immediately bordered by an extremely bad one. So I see all sorts of crap, both good and bad. A couple of years ago, 4 to 5 now maybe, I usually try not to think about it, I was in the back room stocking and heard the front door open. So I came out face first into two younger guys running in with guns drawn. I carry, but I'm not the idiot that thinks he can draw, ready, aim, and fire before someone with a ready weapon kills me. So I put my hands up and stop moving. Guy 1 keeps coming and grabs me by the back of the shirt, while Guy 2 peels off and starts grabbing all of the Newports and scratch tickets. Guy 1 puts the gun to the back of my head and brings me around to the register area where I open the register. He pulls me to the back of the register area by the cigarette display, and his friends move over to empty the till. While they're changing places, Guy 1 says, "Hurry up, blood, let's murk this fool," or something very similar, and gestures with his gun in such a way that I gotta look at it. He had no magazine. His friend may have, but he was facing away on one knee with his weapon stuffed in his rear waistband with his freaking comically long shirt over it. Unfortunately for them, my CZ-75 compact most certainly did. I smacked Guy 1 in the head with my right hand as hard as I could and drew while shooting upwards at him. I wasn't really aiming, just fired twice into center of mass from just above my hip. First round caught him in the upper sternum collarbone area, and the second caught him in the base of the neck and traveled upwards through his skull, before finally ruining the Marlboro light display with bits of his head. Oddly, those cigarette cartons with the red on the white and gold are my clearest memory of that night. I spun towards Guy 2 and fired 3 more times, catching him once in the upper abdomen and twice in the chest. I immediately called 911 and then proceeded to sit on the floor in silence for the 10 minutes it took them to get there, shaking. After all, the adrenaline was wearing off. All said and done, I was questioned for about 20 minutes and my weapon was confiscated for the duration. But other than that, and a month of nightmares, I was fine. Nightmares stopped once the detective in charge of the case let me know that I wasn't the first store they'd robbed and killed or severely beaten the other checkers. Then I was just glad that I'd removed trash like that from the world. Can't hurt anyone now. P.S. Honestly, most of my memory of that night is a big adrenaline blur. Only reason I have any real details besides idiots with empty guns rob someone with bullets is because of the tapes and police reports, except the cigarettes. If I ever need a justice murder boner, I remember the Marlboro lights. It was self-defense, no doubt about it. And if they'd already killed and hurt people, you were just carrying out justice. Story 2. My senior year of college, I had an off-campus apartment in a really crappy part of town. I often went to the batting cages with my roommates just for fun, so we each had our own baseball bat. It was a Friday night and I heard a bang at the back door. I honestly thought it was just one of my roommates who had locked themselves out drunkenly. Well, I get down there and there's a guy in the kitchen wearing a ski mask. I just grabbed one of the baseball bats and swung at this guy as hard as humanly possible. Well, I hit the guy square in the head. He fell back, broke down the sliding closet door. 2 of my roommates came running out and I was just standing over this guy who was profusely bleeding on our kitchen floor. One called 911 and the other one took off the guy's ski mask and we tried to stop the bleeding with it. At this point, the lights were still off and I didn't actually realize how much blood was everywhere. 2 cops show up what felt like an eternity later, and then an ambulance wheeled him off. He died not too long after that. Our last roommate showed up while the police were still taking statements. He just walks in and gives us this look like, "What the heck happened?" And I just said, "I broke your bat, I'm sorry." He didn't really give a crap about the baseball bat. I just didn't know what else to say. None of us slept that night. We just watched South Park on Netflix and all called out of work the next day. I remember there was a lot of disbelief. I mean, I couldn't believe that had just happened. Never felt bad about it, though. I did often wonder for a while what led the guy to break into our place. I do, however, own a .22 revolver now. And I just said, "I broke your bat, I'm sorry." God damn, that was badass. Story 3. My house had been robbed twice while I was at work. One day I had to call out sick, and while I was sleeping, I heard someone downstairs. I called out, "Who's there?" When we're sick, our supervisors come to see if we're actually home, but I was worried because they always knock first, and I was sure I didn't hear any knock or doorbell. I heard footsteps running up the stairs, and I called out I was armed. My supervisor definitely would have stopped, but the footsteps got louder. I got behind the door, and two men charged into my room with guns. I moved my arm and they turned around. I shot one of them in the neck while he shot the wall behind me. The other man ran downstairs. It turns out I shot my coworker's cousin, who knew my schedule of when I wasn't going to be home. The coworker was not in on anything. The other man was the cousin's friend. I was not charged. I do not feel guilty because the last 2 months made me feel very violated. I changed jobs because I was uncomfortable working with people who knew about it. So terrifying to hear that someone has broken into your home. It's never a good idea to keep valuables at home where they can easily be found. Story 4. Happened about a decade ago. I was walking back home and these two kids tried to rob me. I don't necessarily know what age they were, but they were somewhat short. I live in a country in which the average person isn't very tall and pretty scrawny. I was pretty deep into depression that had me at a point in which I didn't really care about much of anything and was contemplating suicide constantly. So, as weird as it might be to say, I wasn't particularly scared, which is probably why he kept getting even more agitated. Both were probably on drugs. One with the gun was yelling more and more, and for some reason I reached out for his gun. In the struggle, the gun fired twice. Both times he got shot and died. The other one started yelling for his brother, charged me with the knife he had. I shot and kept shooting until the gun ran out. Call the police. They couldn't pretend to care less. Two junkie kids on drugs, yeah. Would probably be different in the US. At the time, the only thing that freaked me out was the fact I wasn't freaking out. I kept thinking I was some kind of monster, yet was mostly indifferent towards it. A year later, after I got on meds for my depression and it felt like it crashed on me pretty hard, got heavily into drinking. Story 5. Using a throwaway for personal reasons. I was getting out of the army a few years ago. I took my wife and kids home early in order to focus on getting out and finish selling the house before I completely left the area. I left both of my cars at home with my wife. Had a buddy who was also leaving the army drive me around. So there was 0 cars at my house. Anyways, the front door opened to a hallway to go to the kitchen and back door, and the stairs to go upstairs. I was sleeping on the floor in the master bedroom where the top of the stairs led because all my stuff had been packed except for a few knickknacks and my .45 Smith & Wesson military and police. 3 guys broke in that night, shattered my back door, big center window and door, which woke me up. I didn't have much to take, but my laptop and TV was the only thing downstairs. I heard them talking, heard them say stuff about not having much and taking the laptop and TV. Then heard them talk about looking upstairs. As soon as I heard the first step creak, I yelled out that I have a gun. No movement. Then they pretty much bum rushed the stairs and into my room. I shot the first guy in the neck. His buddy took a shot at me and missed, where he then was shot in the shoulder. The third guy rushed back outside and left his buddies. The guy shot in the neck was dead instantly. Guy with a GSW in shoulder was writhing in pain. Kicked their guns down the stairs and called 911. Cops were there in about 10 minutes. Took my statement, took my gun, and offered an ambulance. Don't think they ever found the third guy also. 3 years later, and I think about it from time to time, what bothers me most is that I didn't kill the guy I shot in the shoulder, so I do fear he could find me again, and also that the house was nearly empty. So that dude lost his life over nothing. I'm pretty much fricked in the head from deployments and such, so this just adds on to it. I just smoke a lot of weed to deal with it. Dang, dude. Sorry you had to go through that. All these stories make me wonder why the frick people are so quick to charge towards people who are yelling that they have a gun. Even if they have guns of their own, it's still not worth losing your life. I mean, crap. I've always thought it's a bad idea to have glass on front or back doors. Way too easy to break. Story 6. About 11 years ago, late 1999, I was jumped by 2 guys at a small park in Whitney, Washington. It was 8:45 to 9 p.m. I had just gotten off of work and was going to run a few laps to burn off some excess energy. The sun was just about to set as it was summertime. but there was a little bit of natural light left. The park was located on top of the plateau-type land formation, and there was only two ways in or out: the road leading up and a small dirt trail at the opposite end of the park. I had been there for about 15-20 minutes when I realized that I not only was being watched by two men, I was being herded into a corner away from both exits. Initially, I told myself I was being paranoid. I picked up my pace in the direction of the dirt path, and that's when one of the guys started running at me, and I knew crap was really going down. I started running full tilt towards the dirt path at the end of the park. Unfortunately, he had a good angle on me and slammed into my hip, lower body, and took me to the ground. At this point, my memory gets very hazy. The first guy who got me was unarmed. We struggled on the ground for a few moments. Years. One thing I remember specifically about this moment was that when you're in a life or death situation, all bets are off. I was scratching his face and gouging at his eyes and pulling his hair and was basically just going ape crap to get away. Shortly after getting tackled, the second guy arrived and he was armed with a knife. I was still struggling with the first guy when I was first stabbed, total of 3 times in the right thigh. I'm not sure if he didn't want to kill me or if he had poor aim, but I was fortunate I was not stabbed in the throat or stomach. The third time I was stabbed, I thrashed and my second assailant lost hold of the knife. I picked it up on impulse and hit him with the butt of the knife in the temple repeatedly until he stopped moving. To be honest, my memory of actually ending his life is almost non-existent. It happened very quickly. His buddy booked it after his companion went down, and I was left at the park with 3 serious stab wounds and a body. This was before I had a cell phone. It was the 2 hours it took me to get help that have stuck with me over the years. I remember being so scared that I was going to jail. Being so scared the other guy was coming back. And overall, just being so freaking scared. At the end of the day, I don't regret what I did. I was not only threatened, I was actually attacked and wounded. I simply defended myself to the best of my abilities. The long-term damage mostly has to do with paranoia in concerns to be followed and watched. Story 7. My parents went out for a date night when I was 10, got me a babysitter from the neighborhood who was 14 or 15. He'd been my babysitter a few times before. I always wanted an older brother. Both my parents worked and my brother is 7 years younger than me, so I never got to have much playtime. He and I would play video games, play with Lego, stuff like that. It was a lot of fun. This night, he tried to molest me. He got on top of me and started touching me. He wasn't much bigger than me, so I was able to get away. We were in the TV room and I ran to my room on the other side of the house. I got my baseball bat and hid behind the door. When he came in, I hit him in the knees and he fell down. I just kept hitting him on the ground. Don't know how long. Eventually, I ran away and called the police and told them to come over. I remember being really scared that he was going to get up and chase after me when I was making the call. Once the call was done and I went over to watch him, I realized he was dead. His face was all mushed up and bleeding, but he still looked surprised. Not really recovered psychologically. I try not to think about it too much. I think about it a lot. What a horrible trauma for you. And at that age, too. The kind of thing you never forget. Story 8. Throwaway for obvious reasons. I'm kind of late, but here it goes. It was my uncle when I was 16. My family was away on a final trip for my other uncle who was dying of cancer. He was my father's closest sibling, so they wanted to have one last trip. Anyways, my other scumbag uncle, who's a crackhead, thief, and a liar, broke into my house thinking we were all away. It was in broad daylight. People were wide awake and he was smashing out our dining room window. He was wearing a mask, which I guess was smart because we've got cameras in the house that we use when we go on trips. So I didn't know who he was when I shot him. I didn't know until the police arrived. He broke in and started walking upstairs towards all our bedrooms. And I shot him in the stairs and he fell down and died 2 hours later in the hospital. I don't feel bad for it. He was a scumbag. My cousin's childhood was fatherless because he spent it all in jail. When he got out of jail, he went back to drugs and stole my cousin's Xbox computer and even tires off my cousin's car to sell for his drugs. His own son. And he was stealing from him to do drugs. Frick him. He had robbed our home before when I was very young, but I figured he had been smart enough to not do it again. He has stolen thousands of dollars from his own mother, who was still supporting him when I shot him, made her sell all the possessions left over from my grandfather to make sure he doesn't land his butt back in jail. Lawyers, car repairs, drugs, 100% supporting a 38-year-old man. No, I don't feel bad for it. I did momentarily when I learned who it was, but a few years after the fact, I did what I would have done to anybody who broke into my house at that time. I'm glad you don't feel bad. Blood doesn't mean anything. The worst people are the ones that hurt their families and kids. Story 9. This isn't my story, but my dad's, rather, hence the throwaway account. My dad is a cop in a bad town nearby to where I live. Anyway, one day he and 3 of his partners get a call to go to a mother's house that a crazy son, not a teenager but a grown man, broke into and turned the gas on, threatening to blow up the place. They enter the house and see this guy sitting on a chair with folded arms. They try to talk some sense into him, but he isn't nearly having it. So 2 guys go to grab him and he jumps up, flinging them both into the wall like rag dolls, revealing that he has a huge kitchen knife, and then begins to rapidly stab one of the men in the head. My dad draws his gun as soon as he sees this, just as the man turns to stab my dad and the 4th partner, and he shoots him straight in the eye socket and he drops immediately. My dad doesn't seem to have any PTSD or anything that I've noticed, and this happened around 15 years ago. Turns out my dad's partner was only stabbed in the head once, and it was a grazing slice. All the others missed. 2 of his 3 partners were fine, but the one standing next to my father, I think, left early from the force due to disability, from not being able to hear out of his ear anymore, or something like that. An autopsy also revealed that the guy that was shot's skull was so thick that if he was shot anywhere else in the head, it probably wouldn't have broke his skull. My dad says he never wanted to kill someone more in his life. Your dad is used to seeing violence. He's kind of hardened to it. Story 10. When I was 8 years old, we lived out in a farmhouse in an orchard. The nearest town was about 10 minutes away, and my dad was working far enough away that he stayed away during the week. One morning, I heard my mom yelling, and I thought I had missed the bus, so I got out of bed and saw a naked man hitting her and trying to grab her. He was out in a bender and had just walked to the nearest lights and broken in. Our dog was barking and nipping at him, but she wasn't a trained attack dog or anything. I ran back into my room and grabbed a little 22 bolt action my dad had given me and the ammo he made me keep separate and loaded it. It seemed like it took forever to load those 5 shots. I ran outside following the dog barking and saw him dragging my mom by her hair. I remember trying to be steady like I had been taught, but I just fired over and over again. I didn't know it at the time, but 3 of the 5 hit him, and he was later found by the police after someone dropped him anonymously at a hospital about an hour away with one of the bullets lodged in his lung. At that age, I had a hard time processing it, mainly because the state mandated I see a counselor, and she kept insinuating I should feel all kinds of emotions I wasn't, which made me feel like there was something wrong with me. In the end, I just feel lucky that I was brought up by my parents who trusted me and spent time teaching me never to panic. Telling you what emotions you should be feeling sounds like terrible counseling. Story 11. This was back in 2003. I was 14 at the time. I was visiting my aunt and uncle in Texas for my 2-week Christmas break. We were all supposed to go out to my cousin's baby shower, but I came down with the chicken pox. Being young at the time, I didn't want to go anyways. I convinced them to go without me. Ended up playing Halo for a few hours in the master bedroom when I heard a window shatter and the alarm start going off. I remember that my uncle kept a gun behind the TV, so I grabbed it. It was some kind of revolver, no idea what kind. All I know is that the hammer was really hard to pull back. What seemed like 5 minutes later, I hear someone coming up the stairs and yelled at him to go away and that I had a gun. Being so young, though, I had the voice of a little brat, and the guy probably thought I was bullshitting. When he got to the top of the stairs, I fired once, and the recoil made me drop the gun. But I think I hit him somewhere since he fell backwards down the stairs. I never found out how the guy died, but I hope it wasn't from the gunshot. I called 911, and sometime later the police came. It turns out that this guy got out of prison a few days before. The guy was drunk and managed to hit some delivery guy on a bike during one of his drunk driving routines. My uncle was his defense attorney. Turns out that it's pretty hard to defend someone when there is security camera footage of you running some guy over and driving away. Guessing that he blamed my uncle for the 5 years he spent in jail and decided to get revenge. Wow, what a piece of crap. Glad you took him out of the gene pool. Story 12. Throwaway for obvious reasons. Back in 2012, 2 men busted in my back door. It took them a few minutes as it was a metal door on a metal frame with sturdy hinges and a lock. One of the guys was probably 6'6" and pretty large. He was finally able to break it off the hinge with a crowbar. When I heard them start hammering on the door, I told my wife to call the police and lock herself and our baby behind 2 doors. And I went out into the hallway with a shotgun. I kept yelling at them to leave and that the cops were coming and that I was armed. They kept coming. Eventually, I heard a pop and the banging stopped and I knew they were through. I told them in no uncertain terms that if I saw them in my house, I was going to kill them. A few seconds later, they came around the corner both holding what appeared to be weapons, and I shot the bigger one twice in the chest. The other one just stood there confused, probably trying to process what in the heck had just happened. He took one step towards me and I shot him as well. Police showed up about 2 minutes later. Both died at the scene. One had a knife and duct tape. The other had the crowbar. I later found out that the larger one was wanted for some sort of manslaughter charge because he killed his girlfriend the state over. I have zero regrets about that night. They had multiple chances to leave, and I have no doubt that they would have hurt my family if I had not stopped them. You did what you had to do to protect yourself and your family. Story 13. This was about 2004, 2006. I don't remember the exact year anymore. I killed a guy that tried to break into my apartment because he was wanting his wife that he had just beat the crap out of 2 a.m. I hear them arguing. I could hear it through my bathroom wall. I shut my bathroom, then bedroom to drown it out. 2:15 a.m. She's banging on my door, broken nose, left eye swollen, and limping from tripping and falling to get out of the apartment. Told her to go to the bathroom, clean herself up, then hide in my bedroom. Husband comes out of the apartment yelling her name, and he notices her blood trail to my apartment. Starts banging on my door, yelling to let him in. I warned him 3 times that if he doesn't stop, I will kill you. He kicks the lock on the door swings open, and I swing my baseball bat down onto his head. He falls to the ground stunned. He lands stomach first, and I see a handgun tucked into the back of his shirt. I grab it, throw it into my apartment, and warn him one more time. He got up, came at me. I slammed my bat into his stomach, then slammed my bat over his head one last time, which caved his skull in. I knew from the blood spatter from when I hit, he was dead. Thankfully, the neighbors had called the police when it started, and the second he fell to the ground dead, police had made it to the top of the steps. It never affected me as much as it should have. I reacted the best way I could for the situation I was in. I don't think about what I did anymore. I can't fix the past. Story 14. I was jumped by 4 guys about 10 years ago. I was down on the ground and they were kicking and punching me. I grabbed my knife from my pocket, reached up and stabbed one of them in the stomach. Blood everywhere, some mine, mostly his. They all ran. One of them yelled back that he would find me later and kill me. He later died at a hospital because he took too long to get help. Basically, I never really felt bad about it, and I don't regret it. It has popped into my head randomly from time to time, and it weirds me out that I took a person's life. But that's about it. Doesn't last long. My thoughts about it are that I was protecting myself and whether or not they would have killed me. I feel it was not justified, but exactly what I should have done. Hey, they're the ones stupid enough to attack you. Story 15. I was in an incident where I shot and killed a squatter during an eviction. In all honesty, he shot me first, and I don't really remember all the details, which is probably a good thing. I was also present with a marshal at the time, so there wasn't much of a report to take. I think about it sometimes, especially when my shoulder hurts. Hard not to, honestly. I'm alive and he isn't. And at the end of the day, I feel pretty good about that. I never knew his name or why he fired his weapon at me instead of just walking out peacefully. He's probably in an unmarked grave somewhere in Michigan, and that doesn't bother me too much. I don't intend to end up like that man. He drew first, you simply defended yourself. Story 16. I killed two during a home invasion many years ago. I was kind of freaked out at first, but have not suffered any long-term issues as these fricks were coming to shoot me and my family, and I gave them proper warning, and they still came in and raised their guns at me. Frick them, and I hope the third one that ran got some damage too. I'd do it exactly the same way if it happened now. Well done. Your family is lucky to have you. Sorry the third one got away. Hopefully he learned his lesson. Click on one of the videos on the screen now, or Karen will sue you.